Hi, everyone. Welcome to Art and Talk. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm Leslie Sue, the host for Art and Talk. If you're new to us, Art and Talk is all about meeting artists and being inspired. We bring on artists, they share their art, their creativity, and their passion. If you've been watching us for a while, welcome. Thank you so much for your continued support. So today we have a guest who is a musician, vocalist, who has folk and acoustic guitar influences. And of course, we'll be diving into his musical journey. He's also going to be performing for us, and he's also going to be sharing his knowledge base on high-end acoustic guitars as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for being with us. I'd like to welcome our guest for today, Stevie Coyle. Hi, Stevie. Welcome.
Hi, Leslie Sue. Nice to see you. Thank you. Lovely intro. You make me sound like a great guy.
Oh my gosh, we're so glad that you're here. All right, so wow, where would you like to start? Could you just give us a little bit of your background, kind of getting into the whole like musicality that's been, most of your life?
Sure. I got terribly interested in music when my dad in Southern California. I was raised in Southern California. My dad was the first person to take a radio station full Spanish. He was working for a radio station that had no format, so nobody was buying advertising. They'd have 15 minutes of Lithuanian folk music and then 15 minutes of Bible thumping preacher, and there was no format. People didn't want to buy advertising because they didn't know how to reach their audiences. So as this poor station was swirling the drain, as they say, my dad walked into the owner's office clutching just the white pages of the Rodriguez section of the Los Angeles white pages at the time, the telephone book. And he said, "Why is nobody marketing to these people? There's a huge audience here in Southern California of Spanish speaking people." The fellow said, "Go ahead, do what you got to do." So my dad started off this radio station, recast it as Spanish language. The upshot of that was that all of the records, the promotional records that went out to every radio station, if it started with a K or a W, everybody got a promo record of all the pop music that was coming through at the time. Well, all of a sudden, all of those albums didn't fit the format. He brought them home to me and my brother.
Mhm.
So every day was Christmas. Dad would step out of the car with an armload of LPs. And we'd say, what do we get today? What do we get today? And he brought home all kinds of stuff. Ted Heath, big band music from England.
Mhm.
The stuff that we were particularly interested in was the Ventures. And actually, I think it was Venture surf guitar music, really proto or early surf guitar music, great stuff. And I remember one day in particular, the Ventures, an album called Guitar Freakout came home, and an album called Alvin and the Chipmunks played the Beatles hits. And we didn't know from the Beatles. We were like 9 and 10 at the time. We didn't know, or 7 or 8 at the time. We didn't know from that. But we thought Alvin and the Chipmunks were cool, and we loved the sounds of those guitars. We wanted to sound like those guitars. So my brother and I both got interested in guitar at that point. My mother was a wonderful musician herself. She played mandolin in mandolin orchestras back in the 20s and 30s when she was in high school and college. And she was a string musician herself. So she was interested in our interest in stringed instruments. She got us a little ukulele, a little plastic ukulele with a little box that strapped onto it with rubber bands that had buttons on it, and you just pressed the buttons to play the chords. You didn't even have to finger the chords. So we'd be strumming along on our ukulele to Go Tell Aunt Rhody and whatever else we could find in the little ukulele books. At the same time, next door to us was a wonderful band would rehearse. This was, like I say, in Southern California. I grew up in Arcadia, which my dad used to jokingly refer to as the jewel of the smog belt. Very smoggy place. But right next door to us rehearsed a band that played at Disneyland, which was about 30 miles away.
Mhm.
And they rehearsed there. These kids were 8 or 9, 10 years older than we were, and they were really good. They played at Disneyland as one band, and then they'd kind of duck behind the Matterhorn and change costumes and pop out in another land as another band. Great string band. So we'd hear them rehearsing at night. Our little old house had no air conditioning. And so the windows were open, and we heard this wonderful string band music drifting in from next door at night while we were trying to get to sleep in the smoggy, hot Los Angeles summers. So that got in there somehow too. And when we finally got on St. Patrick's Day, I remember it, why wouldn't I? St. Patrick's Day of 1966, when I was 10 years old, my, uh, my mother bought us both steel string guitars.
Mm.
And they were terrible. They were just awful. They were dime store guitars, but we loved them, of course. And we dug out our guitar books. We'd had some ukulele books, and we thought, oh, it's time to dig out the guitar books. And we played the one chord, and then we played the other chord. That third chord was really hard to play, though. So we went next door and talked to Davey, one of the guys in the band that rehearsed next door. He was always really cool. He made funny faces. He did impersonations of people. He's a wonderful musician, played everything, banjo, fiddle, mandolin, guitar, great musician. We said, Davey, we can play this chord and that chord, but we can't play that chord. He said, oh, no, you're not going to be able to play that the polite way, that people normally play. You're going to have to learn to get your thumb over the top and really grab it hard and play like this. And he gave us our first guitar lessons, and that turned Davey was this wonderful musician. Some of your viewers might know as David Lindley, who was probably best known for being the sideman for Jackson Browne for years and years, playing lap steel guitar and electric guitar, also in a band called El Rayo X. Really one of the progenitors of world music back then. He had a wonderful band in the late 60s called Kaleidoscope. So that's how the whole music thing got started. And I'll take a breath here.
Wow, well, what an amazing beginning, with your dad bringing home the LPs and your mom already, having the musicality and the background. So and then the neighbors with the band too, and then getting your first lessons, as you were saying, with David Lindley. I mean, things were really kind of like getting set up for you at quite an early age.
Oh, you bet. You bet they were. It was a conspiracy of circumstances. My grandmother too was a wonderful musician. My dad's mother was a musician from vaudeville,
Mhm.
and she was a wonderful pianist, played by ear mostly. Back in the silent movie days, the movie houses, the studios would send along music to be played with various scenes in the silent movies, and she'd kind of look at that and go, "Oh yeah, okay, I can do that sort of." But she would just watch the screen and play along and play just out of instinct. She's a wonderful natural musician.
Right.
And she got to be very popular because no two shows were the same.
Mhm.
And people would come back to see the same movie just to see what Bertha was going to play this time, because she always threw in little cultural references, little songs people would know.
Mhm.
And it was always extra added, value added entertainment.
Mhm.
So she got to be very popular in that respect. So she was a wonderful musician as well that, used to out with these wonderful old showbiz sayings, these wise old saws that have stood me in good stead because they're kind of fundamental, basic showbiz principles that stick, that hold.
Mhm.
So
Now,
yes, all kinds of influences from everywhere.
right, yes. And so with all these influences having a real strong hold on you and whatnot, now as time went on, did you pursue music? Because I noticed in your bio, your degrees are more in theology and theater. So how does all this kind of fit in? I mean, obviously the theater kind of fits in with some of what you were saying.
Yes.
So there was that. So focusing on music as time went on, how did that all sort of unfold for you, Stevie?
Well, on the music angle, my brother and I, played a lot of venture stuff together. We had a little duo throughout high school and then college, and played as the Coyle brothers, doing all kinds of stuff. All acoustic guitars. We never really got into electric at that point, playing acoustic guitars. And then all through then as well, we both were playing for guitar mass. Folk masses were big in the 60s and 70s. So we played for Catholic liturgies, and that kind of went through all the way through college as well. After college, I got involved in other entertainment exploits. I traveled with a little circus for several years, and then joined a theater company in the South San Francisco Bay and was a stage manager and then an actor for that theater company, and then got into commercial acting, all the while still playing guitar, and occasional professional gigs, as solo acts. Along about this time too, I met up with a dear brother from another mother, as they say, a gentleman named Roy Zimmerman, who was a musician and comedian and we formed various groups together, duos and trios, with the two of us and sometimes another person or two. And so the guitar carried through there as well, and the music carried through all of that as well. And then along about the late 90s, when we got all the way up to the late 90s, I had been playing a lot of solo gigs, but then found a little group that we all had the same kind of idea. Let's do any type of music, but do it all on acoustic instruments. That time, when we started off, two guitars and a fellow who played fiddle and mandolin. And that turned out to be a really winning sort of idea. People really liked the idea of hearing really heavy-duty rock music or deep Chicago blues on acoustic instruments.
Mhm.
And that kind of grew and blossomed and changed into a band that I toured with for many years called the Waybacks.
Mhm.
And then after my departure from the Waybacks, I toured solo for 5 years after that. The day I decided to stop touring, it was spooky. I was coming back from a tour of the Pacific Northwest, a wonderful time, an anchor gig in Seattle at a festival called the Moisture Festival. You know, Seattle figures very foggy, got to have a moisture festival. And it's kind of the world premiere venue for variety arts, for vaudeville. So kind of a wonderful loop back to my grandmother who entertained in vaudeville. And I was coming back from that as the anchor gig with a bunch of house concerts and teaching gigs along the way at music stores and whatnot. And I got back down as far as about Ashland, and I thought, oh, you know what? I'm done touring. How about that? I'm kind of done. And it wasn't an angry sort of, I'm out of here. It was just, oh, how about that? I'm not going to be doing this anymore. How about that? The very next day, my niece called me up from her music shop, a little tiny music shop she had, and said, we're taking over the building. We're going to take over this giant space next door. We can't use all of the square footage for our music shop. Have you ever thought of opening a guitar shop? And I hadn't, but I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I should look into this. And sure enough, here I am. 9 years, that was 9 years ago, and here I am in a shop full of wonderful high-end acoustic guitars.
Mhm. Wow, what an interesting way that all unfolded for you, Steve.
Indeed it was.
Yes. So I know that you're very knowledgeable with the high-end acoustic guitars. I'm wondering if we could just kind of maybe jump into having you perform one of your songs, and then we'd love to have you share your knowledge base with us as well.
Sure. I have the best job in the world. I do my email, I change guitar strings, I update the website, mightyfineguitars.com. I do my thing, and people walk in with wonderful guitars and say, for whatever reason, I'm not playing this guitar. My hands don't operate the way they used to. This guitar was always too big for me. I never learned how to play, or I have other guitars that I play and I don't play this one. I think if I had to name the place again, I called it Mighty Fine Guitars at the time.
Mhm.
If I had to name it again, I'd probably call it Karma Guitars, just because so many people figure I'm kind of blowing my karma here by hanging onto this guitar that it's a great guitar. Somebody should be playing it. I'm not. Let's move it along.
Wow.
So I perhaps would have renamed it, given the choice, if I knew then what I know now. But somebody walked in with this the other day.
Mhm.
It's by an outfit called the Santa Cruz Guitar Company, all handmade stuff, very small shop, just a few people make guitars there. It's not a big production factory line. Just a few guitars are made there every month by a few people. And this one is an OM model. Some of your guitar pals will know that that's a Martin designation. Martin is the really premier and earliest American really fine guitar making company. And their designations, OMD, M, triple O, all of these little designations are borrowed by other makers just because they become so standardized. So this is very much in the style of a Martin OM guitar, which just means orchestra model. It's a certain size and configuration and shape. And this one is a cedar top, which is unusual. A lot of guitars are spruce topped. This one is cedar, which has a little less sparkle to it, a little more warmth, a little more depth, not quite as much ping and zing. And the back and sides are really quite spectacular. Koa, Hawaiian koa. Let's see if I can get a better view of that for you. I realize the reflection of my
Mhm.
of my laptop is in there. I hope you can see around that.
Yeah.
This is an Escher painting happening right before our eyes here. How about that? Look at that. So this is a really wonderful guitar. It was commissioned by a shop nearby here. They've never made one just like this, with this combination rather of woods. Big, bright, clear sound. Wonderful, wonderful. And see, this is just the nightmare of my job, is having to play all these wonderful guitars that walk into my shop unbidden. It's quite remarkable. Well, I'll play you one. I'll play you a bit of one. It kind of goes on and on and on, but I went to on and on and on and fixed that. And this, I'll just do a snippet of this one for you. It's kind of a sing-along, really. When I was 17 and just a little bit bewildered, feeling cheated and hungover in the wake of adolescence, my recruiter took my number and he graded my exam. Said you'd be a perfect soldier, except you got no depth perception. Said I want to serve my country and I got so much potential. He said what you lack in weight you more than make up for in density. You see, I'd always suffered from a lack of self-esteem. So if my country doesn't want me, then I'll serve the Catholic Church. So I enrolled in seminary where I memorized the gospel, but they caught me reading on the road and threw me on my butt. There were a bunch of other factors which I won't enumerate. So then I'm sitting in my parents' Norman Rockwell living room and being still so as to hear my ego crashing in my ears when the voice of reason says, son, have you thought about the future? And I get real sick, but now I'm fine. I'm really fine. Second verse, same as the first. By 23, I'd gained a sort of enigmatic drive, and having no success with suicide, I thought I'd turn to art. So I acquired a set of brushes and I went without a bath, which presumably implied I had a new set of beliefs. But I'd underestimated the important role of talent, which was easily apparent from the record of my sales. And in the meantime, I'd severely strained a muscle in my thigh, attempting to sustain the lotus on a neighbor's kitchen table. In the hospital, I thought of doing something for the world, but the Peace Corps didn't answer, so I joined a cooking school, having always held and cherished an affinity for food. But my self-respect deflated with an undercooked souffle, and I was back to bussing tables at the Denny's in Salinas, where I sort of snapped. But now I'm well. I'm really well. And 37 verses just like that.
Wow, that was great. And your personality comes through, your lightness and a sense of humor. And we got a nice little autobiographical kind of song guitar playing.
Yeah, that's Roy Zimmerman and I did that. We always joke and say that he wrote my autobiography. That's from my old comedy partner Roy Zimmerman and me. And boy, the more I play this guitar, even on just a goofy little two-chord song like that, it's really wonderful. It's magic. The people walk in the door with this stuff.
Yeah, how amazing is that? You're in the right place for sure.
I ended up in the right place. I sure did.
Yeah, yeah. It really sounds like everything is really lined up for you quite easily, and even the premonition that you had, which was very interesting, Stevie. You just all of a sudden you were like, okay, I'm finished, and then the next day, as the situation and story that you shared with us, how everything just kind of like, okay, here now I have this guitar shop, and people are coming in with these great guitars and passing them on, and here we go.
And here we go. And even in the midst of COVID, I've been very fortunate. I realize so many people have been so unfortunate with the ramifications of COVID. But it seems that a lot of people, being holed up for as long as they have been, decided, well, this is the time I'm going to make good on those New Year's resolutions from 1983 and I'm going to learn to play guitar. Or people that have guitar said, this is my chance. I'm around the house a lot in my pajamas. I'm going to pick up that guitar and actually learn how to do it. So between the one, people still buying guitars, and some people just figuring, you know what? Life is short. I'm going to get the guitar I always wanted. I'm going to get something really good. And this shop is kind of the good stuff, you know. And other folks decided this is my chance to finally learn how to play guitar. So I've been, like I said, 16 months ago, I'd never even heard of Zoom. And now I'm on it, you know, multiple times a day with multiple folks from all over the world, you know, doing guitar lessons.
Mhm, mhm. And the guitar lessons on Zoom, as opposed to, having your student next to you, what are the differences with that? Or maybe some advantages, some, maybe obvious disadvantage. How does that play out for you in terms of, a teacher?
Yeah, you know, actually, there are advantages. If it's a brand new, if it's a person that's brand new to guitar, it's not so great. Just because I really need to be there at first to kind of wrestle fingers around, you know, to actually move the hands around and get things set up, at least for the first lesson. But otherwise, there are actually some serious advantages, not the least of which is we're not burning gas to get to and from lessons, you know. It doesn't have that personal touch, but one of the big benefits, as you know, as you're doing right now, you can record either a whole lesson or bits of lessons, you know. And typically what I do is we'll have some instruction, some back and forth. One of the disadvantages is we can't play together in real time because of the latency, you know. But that's more than balanced out, I think, by the fact that at the end of the lesson, I can do just a quick little 5-minute video of everything we went over, really condensed, really fast, everything we went over in that particular lesson, so that not only can people take a lesson, get some instruction, while they're doing that, they're amassing a video library as well of reference videos that they can get to anytime they want. And you know, midnight, all of a sudden, you know, I'm not falling asleep here. I'll go see what we recorded at the end of the lesson with Stevie. So some real advantages there. All of the advantages on the share screen stuff, to be able to listen to videos and watch videos together, or to pop up a whiteboard and draw out some tablature. You know, there are definitely advantages.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely sounds that way. That was a really good kind of sum up for us, Stevie. What other guitars do you have that you could share with us, that are maybe some of your favorites and you just love?
Oh golly! In fact, you know, I wonder if I can hold on to your hats. I'm going to move the camera a little bit here,
Okay.
but I'll swing it around a little bit so you can see that wall over there
Oh yeah.
is pretty much the small guitars. I call that the wall of small. And even though back in my high school and college days, certainly in the 70s and before, if it wasn't a big guitar, it wasn't a guitar. Just because that was what we all saw on album covers, were big, again, using the Martin designations, dreadnought guitars. And still in a lot of people's minds, if it ain't a dreadnought, it ain't a guitar. But on that wall, I've got a lot of small guitars, because I think as people as people get older, sometimes, to occasionally, to frequently, they get bigger, and they no longer fit around their big-bodied guitars from the 60s and 70s or 80s. And so smaller guitars, couch guitars, couch cuddlers, and sofa sweethearts, I've heard them referred to. Because let's face it, that's where a lot of guitar gets played, is sitting on the couch, kind of watching Netflix or sports or something, you know, and just kind of strumming, picking along, which is actually a great way to practice guitar, I think, occasionally. So many people are under the misconception that playing guitar and practicing guitar is a lot of total concentration. You're completely quiet. You're thinking about what you're doing. Playing guitar, the term, I think, describes itself. It's playing guitar. It's playing. It's not working. At first, it's working. It's hard work because you're burning new circuits in your brain. You've got to do that first. But then, once you're trying to kind of nail things down, you've got a rough idea of how your song goes, whatever you're working on. Sitting in front of the TV is great to help cement that idea. Your eyes are fairly still, even on a big screen TV. Your eyes are fairly still, so it's easy to drop into alpha, and you become more impressionable in that way. The executive function up here kind of lets go, and the frog brain back here can take over, which is really what you want to have happen. Playing guitar is there's a wonderful, fabulous guitarist, a fingerstyle guy named Tommy Emmanuel, who's just beyond the beyonds. There's kind of Tommy, and then there's all the rest of us mere mortals. He's just that good, and a wonderful entertainer as well. And he was famously asked, Tommy, what are you thinking about when you're up on stage playing music? He says, I'm not thinking about anything. You can't be thinking about stuff while you're playing music. It's got to just be sort of emerging from, and I think he even used the term brainstem or something, from farther back on the brain than thinking about it. So all of which is to say, small guitars on the couch watching TV is a great way to nail things down, to let them drop back into being automatic muscle memory instead of actual forebrain memory. Frog brain instead of forebrain is the way I always characterize it. So that wall is kind of all about that. Those are our little guitars. Let me grab one of. Oh no! Hang on just a sec. I'll be right back. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll be right there. I'm retrieving a very small guitar. This one is a Washburn. And Washburn was one of those companies back around the turn of the previous century that was chasing Martin. Martin was, even then, was a premier company. And so they tried to build guitars that looked like Martins, but they often didn't go to the trouble of making them sound like Martins. They built them much more inexpensively. They didn't use wood that was cured properly, so they often blew up and kind of exploded. This one, however, is a Washburn from 1898.
Oh, wow.
Of all things, and it's just gorgeous. It's in fantastic shape considering it's all those years old. It's Brazilian rosewood on the back and sides, which I wish didn't sound as good as it does, but Brazilian rosewood does have a certain sound to it. It's very rare and it's endangered. But wood this old, and this, even though this guitar was built in 1898, the wood was cured properly, which means, excuse me, it sat around in the Washburn factory for years and years, decades perhaps before that. So this is very old Brazilian rosewood. It has a certain sound. It's so hard to talk about sound, but I think an analogy that I heard was really great. There was a fellow that came into my shop and was playing a bunch of guitars, shopping for himself. And every time he played one, I'd look over and think, that's the one. I hope you get that one. And then I had dinner with him one night. He and his, my wife and he and his wife all had dinner together, and they're real foodies. They really showed us all about foods, things that we didn't know. It was fascinating. Then he was in here. He came in a couple of nights later with her, and I saw them coming up, and I thought, oh well, they're kind of down to the final decision. He wants to play them for her and see what she thinks. So I absented myself. I went into the back room and did some stuff. Just gave him the space for a while. And when I came back in, she was saying to him, it was down to 2 guitars. And she was saying to him, no, not the lemony one. I like the chocolate one. And they knew what they were talking about. And I kind of did too. Brazilian rosewood has kind of a chocolatey sound to it. It's rich, it's deep, it's brown. It's just, it was a good image to use. But trying to talk about sound is the hardest part of my day. There are 2 terms somebody pointed out to me that natively refer to sound, and that's louder and quieter. Everything else is some kind of an analogy, a simile, a metaphor. It's some sort of comparison. Doesn't apply directly to sound. So you have to use like wine descriptors, buttery and oaky and all of those things. And everybody likes the term in reference to guitars, loves the term warm. I don't know what warm means. Does that mean kind of mid-range? You like the middle sounds of the guitar, or the real high sounds, or the real low sounds? What are you talking about? Who knows? I always have to hone that descriptor down and ask what they mean by that. But to everybody, warm is good. Whatever it means good.
So it sounds like in terms of hearing that, Stevie, that you know what you hear, but you don't necessarily have like a word for it, like you were saying warm, or like the foodies, they were kind of analogizing it to foods, and it made sense to them. So I just found that very interesting. So you know what you hear, and you can differentiate obviously between all the different nuances and tones and the this and the that, but then articulating it is kind of bringing it to a different level of knowledge.
Exactly. And finding a common place with a visitor in the shop, finding commonality. There's always a bit of negotiation around terminology. How would you describe that sound? And if they describe a sound that I have a descriptor for myself, I can just sort of make an instant one-to-one translation and say, oh, okay, when you say that, it means this other word to me, you know. So we kind of arrive at the same place sonically. We get to the guts of the matter, we get to the heart of the matter,
Right.
but without using perhaps the same terminology, without a little negotiation.
So do you think that some of it, Stevie, is just sort of, well, obviously when you're first learning, or maybe even when you're at an intermediate level, you obviously have to seek the wisdom of someone who is more advanced. But do you think that also some of it, in terms of, like, as you were saying, you wanted them, or they wanted you to be a little bit more precise in describing the tone, that maybe that the listener needs to listen and trust what they hear, as opposed to being so stuck on a specific word, meaning, oh, if you say that word, that's great, and maybe bypassing perhaps what they're actually hearing. Is there truth to that?
Oh yes, absolutely. My motto here is, if you love it, it's a great guitar. It's all up for grabs. I think you can talk in terms kind of quantitatively. I can find ways to understand what people are talking about. Qualitatively, if they like it or don't like it, that's entirely up to them. I don't characterize one guitar as better than another guitar. Ones that I have preferences for, certainly, but there are people that play guitars that typically I tend not to like the sound of. They love them, and that's perfect. I was thinking of getting some bumper stickers made up. If you love it, it's a great guitar. I have to take my own medicine on that score, because I've missed a big opportunity. I was out there touring somewhere. I can't remember if it was with the band or solo. I was in the middle of the country somewhere, Oklahoma or Missouri or someplace, who knows. And would make, with the band and solo, would always make an effort to get to the guitar shops in town if we were going to be in town for more than a day, just to take a look around, see what was out there. And there was this Harmony guitar, which was a Sears brand. It was sold at department stores, inexpensive guitar. It sounded great. It was fantastic. And it was $175, which was very inexpensive. And I thought, golly, I'm too good a guitarist to buy a $175 guitar. What a dummy. I think about that guitar every week. And I think, where is it? I wonder who bought it. I wonder if it'll ever come back around, and if I'll ever find it again. But I just blew a big opportunity by me being Mr. Smarty Pants and thinking the price tag wasn't high enough for me to, or I shouldn't really like a Harmony guitar that much, But that was a wonderful guitar. It just had mojo. See, this is where I get to what I call X factor, where I can't articulate what I mean, even to myself. I can't say this guitar has XYZ and really delineate everything and encapsulate it all in some sort of articulated series of words. If it's got mojo, if it's got X factor, that's the most important thing. And I think in a shop like this, that's really what you can do, is walk in and play a bunch of guitars and let one choose you,
Yeah.
Let the X factor be the determinant. Some folks their stake in guitars is, what the woods are, what the braces are made of, what the dimensions are. Other people, I don't care. I'm going to play everything and see if one jumps up and bites me on the butt. Those are the ones you want, are the ones that choose you for reasons you can't articulate. I think that's the best way to encounter a guitar and end up buying one.
Yeah, I love that. It's so beautiful, and it has such a mystical feel, because that guitar chooses you, not you choose it based on, whatever kind of preferences, or this or that. I think that is so beautiful. And I really like, Stevie, what you had mentioned just a little while ago, sort of like a process of becoming, adept at the guitar. You were saying that a lot of people feel that, it's like a lot of work, it's a lot of this and that. Well, you were saying, of course, yeah, in the beginning, and whatnot, but one of the ways to kind of ground into being able to play and get that feel, kind of like within you, as you were saying, just sit back on the couch, you have Netflix on, and you're just playing, and it's sort of this organic, beautiful, like natural process where you're actually accessing parts of you that you might not if you're just in that too much of an intense focus. You're not
Exactly.
being in that kind of effortless flow.
Great way to phrase it. Great way to phrase it. That's what you're looking for. And to that end, I always, especially with beginners, advanced beginners, people that perhaps have had bad experiences with guitar, I think it's a horrible mistake for most of us, not everyone, but for most of us, to try and learn to play guitar and learn to read music at the same time.
Mhm.
Often there are a number of stumbling blocks in the way that I think get in the way of the play aspect. What I like to do for people that are just starting off is show them three chords that are among the simplest to play, and just turn them loose with three. The joke in country music is it's three chords and the truth. That's all you need is three chords and the truth. And it's kind of true. Three chords, you can play millions of songs, literally and truly, millions of songs can be played with three chords. So if you turn somebody loose with three fairly easy chords to play, they're all of a sudden playing music. They're not worried about attaching that to some abstract dots on a grid or dots on 5 lines on a piece of paper. They're playing out of themselves instead of being generated by their eyes. Having music generated by the eyes, I need to see it, and then I'll do something physical, and then the music will come out. With these three chords, they are fairly simple to remember. I can give a person a list of a dozen songs right off the bat that would incorporate the same three chords. Another horrible mistake that is made, and this is a little bit esoteric, but so often when people are instructional books that I have here, I have a stack somewhere of bad instructional materials that are just awful for various reasons. But so many of them, they were awful because they started guitar players off reading music at the same time, which I think is a terrible mistake, and starting off in the key of C. Now, what that means for those of your fans that are guitar players, they'll know that if you're playing in the key of C, the second chord you bump into is an F chord. And an F chord is very difficult to play at first. There are more people that would have been playing guitar today if they hadn't bumped into that F chord at the outset. Because the first page of so many instructional materials is tuning the guitar, which is really hard. Nothing to be left to somebody who's brand new to guitar. Even if you have a pitch pipe at the time, 1,000 years ago, as you have a pitch pipe or a tuning fork, or get this note off a piano, or listen to the sound of a fluorescent light has a certain pitch to it that's almost one of the notes you need. All of that stuff, the first page is really difficult in instructional manuals because it's tuning. Then you turn the page and they hit you up with the key of C and you're bumping into that F chord. So if people weren't intimidated enough by that first page and it being all about tuning a guitar, which is a non-trivial event even for experts, the second page kills their interest altogether because they can't do that F chord and they figure, I must not be a guitarist, I must not be talented, I must not be a musician, which is a nightmare. There's so many people that I try and disabuse of that notion that there's somehow that F chord should stop you. You can steer around the F chord forever. There are lots of total pros I know who don't play that F chord the way it's indicated in the books. There's lots of ways around that. So just cause some poor person out there might be figuring, oh, wait a minute, I got stopped by the F chord too. Come on back, try it again. Yeah. Steer you around it. There's ways and there's ways where you can play music without it being a nightmare. Mm-hmm. And you can play music without having to read music. Two separate skills that I don't think blend successfully for most of us at the outset.
Yeah, I love your teaching approach, Stevie.
Oh,
I'm wondering if you could play another song for us.
Sure. I'll play you one that is just one of my favorite songs. I think it's a beautifully constructed song. It's not by me. It's by a gentleman named Woody Paul. People know him as Woody Paul. His real name is Paul Krisman. And he's the king of the cowboy fiddlers. Woody Paul, the king of the cowboy fiddlers, in a band called Riders in the Sky. And he's just that good. Hang on a second, leave my little footstool. He's just that good. The band I was with recorded this song. The Waybacks recorded this song. And it was kind of one of their early offerings. And we realized months later, after we had done this recording and sold a bunch of copies of the first record, Devolver was the name of the album, that we'd never paid him. I had forgotten that he wasn't listed. There's an agency that usually handles what they call mechanical royalties. Just, you pay a flat fee for having recorded somebody. He wasn't registered with them. So I wrote to him directly. I emailed him and said, "We forgot to pay you. How do we do it?" And he said, "Oh," and he answered back in character. This guy is an MIT scientist. He's a theoretical plasma physicist or something, brilliant, brilliant guy. He writes back in character as Woody Paul, the king of the cowboy fiddlers. "Well, that's all right, partner. Things is pretty good here at the ranch. Things is pretty good here at the ranch. And there's ice in the ice box, and the light bulb in there works too. So we're doing okay. You just send the money when you can. It's all right. Your old pal, Woody Paul." Brilliant guy, just hilarious. Well, he wrote this little song that I think is just a jewel. And I'll play it for you here. Let's see. But I need to tune this guitar. Even just tuning this little old guitar, this little Washburn, that sounds so wonderful because they really went whole hog on this instead of just trying to copy the way Martin looked. And Washburn still came up with some pretty good low-end guitars, but they often didn't last because, like I said, they didn't let the Brazilian rosewood cure properly, and the guitars blew up and they don't exist anymore. This one was built with the fine woods. And again, for the guitar nerds in your audience, this one is not ladder braced. The braces underneath the top here don't run this way. There's a big X brace through this, which lets the top flex a whole lot more and gives you so much more bass response and sweetness. There is a place I know way down in Mexico, high in the old Sierra Madres, where many an outlaw band from across the Rio Grande have found a haven, a holdout, a hideaway. But danger rides with those who stray upon that secret hideaway, where death is sure to welcome anyone within the law. But if a man must run from any lawman's gun, he'll find compadres in the old Sierra Madres. Deep in the dark of night, beside the campfire's light, they weave the tales of the lives of the bandits, of jewels rare and old, of coaches filled with gold, of hold-ups pulled off just like they planned it. But danger rides with those who stray upon that secret hideaway, where death is sure to welcome anyone within the law. This is your part. But if a man must run from any lawman's gun, he'll find compadres in the old Sierra Madres. I got this one. There's a place I know way down in Mexico, high in the old Sierra Madres, where many an outlaw band from across the Rio Grande have found a haven, a holdout, a hideaway. But danger rides with those who stray upon that secret hideaway, where death is sure to welcome anyone within the law. But if a man must run from any lawman's gun, he'll find compadres in the old Sierra Madres. But if a man must run from any lawman's gun, he'll find compadres in the old Sierra Madres. Isn't that a great song?
Yes, that was so beautiful. Thank you, Stevie.
Oh, my pleasure entirely. I love singing that song.
Yeah. We have a few minutes left. I have a couple of questions. First, I wanted to go back to, as you had mentioned earlier, kind of like when you're playing, what are you thinking about? Nothing. You know, it's kind of like not that, almost like that transcendental quality. It's not like that, you know, mind kind of focus. Is that how you just felt? Like, is that what you were experiencing? Could you kind of share that with us?
Yeah, it's always a bit of a conversation because there's things to be done. There are tasks to be accomplished. But ideally, the I always joke and say it's the second best feeling in the world to play music and disappear into it, you know? And it's true. There's a sense of a distance, of kind of watching from a distance or from above, in observer mode, looking down and saying, okay, yeah, you're breathing, you're blinking, you're doing all the stuff. You're going to be moving here next. This is that difficult chord. Make sure and get into position for it. This time. Let's try this. We don't usually go here, but let's try. So there's a bit of verbalization going on in the mind, but for the most part, it's execution. It's just sublimating that to just execution with an occasional sort of shout from off in the distance. Hey, move up to the seventh fret. Oh, don't forget, wouldn't this the other thing sound good here from this other song? Yeah, let's try that. There are these suggestions that come rocketing in from the great distance, but ideally it's just execution. It's just quiet and kind of quiet, empty space, and
Wow,
it's a good
yeah,
feeling.
yeah, I love how you describe that. That really shows a great, you know, sense of like purposefulness, and you're just you're hearing things, you're doing things, but it's just like this, like as you were saying, it was just like this flow, like almost like you're just one with the spirit and doing what you're meant to do. Like
Yeah.
it's just naturally kind of coming out.
Yeah, it's a goal and it's not easy to get to, but I think this is another reason to start people off with just three chords and let them bang away. Let them just wail away on those three chords and make sounds that sound like what they hear in their heads or what they've heard on a record. Just imitation is great at first, and playing and singing loud really does make the difference. Constantly encouraging people in here just because these are really fine, lovely instruments. I don't want people to bang on them and really hurt them. But folks tend to be very timid in playing things really, really quietly. Below a certain threshold, guitars sound identical. They just sound like a little bit of string noise and a little bit of body resonance. You don't really get the sense of what a guitar can do until you find that threshold. That's kind of the first thing whenever a guitar comes in. I'll kind of play a few little things that always help me figure out what the threshold of the guitar is. How in crude terms, how hard do I need to hit it to make it activate, to make it sound like itself? And it's not like I'm really wailing on the guitar. It's just finding is it that much? Is it that much? A slight difference, but really makes all the difference in terms of feeling the body activate and getting the sound out. So that's, I think, is in getting even beginners to a sense of flow is the first challenge, among the first challenges, I should say, is always that sense of getting from chord to chord. That takes some doing. That takes some forebraining to figure out I've got to get from here to here to here.
Sure.
How do I do that?
Right.
And how many times do I need to do that before it starts to drop back into muscle memory? Lots and lots and lots, of course. That's the answer, is repetition. And being half mindful at first, in a sense, and then half the other time, mindful, I think, most guitarists would focus on the left hand. What is my left hand doing? I'm moving from target space to target space in the left hand. The right hand is all about, let's go. Let's be rhythmic about this. The first thing anybody responds to musically is the rhythm. That was the death knell for records on the old American Bandstand program 1,000 years ago with Dick Clark. Kids dancing to some new record that came out, And afterwards, oh, what'd you think of that? Well, I liked the melody, but I couldn't dance to it. Oh, that was the worst, is if you can't dance to it. If there's nothing for the listener or the dancer, the listener to participate in, if there's nothing in the space between the listener and the performer that's out there in the middle that you can both get to, if it's all about the performer, uh, then there's much less opportunity to play there, to get into it, to let the right hand turn loose and be terribly rhythmic.
Mhm.
So those are among the first challenges, getting the first three chords to move quickly amongst them and to be able to drive through. And at that point, even somebody with just three chords can get into a flow state. They can feel themselves generating music. It's coming from inside me. It's not something I'm reading. And that's one of the best parts and the worst parts, the best of times and worst of times, of course, about the internet and YouTube. Is a lot of people are playing music, but I'm always cautioning folks to not be too eyeball generated. Get the information you need from there, and then start looking at the guitar, or close your eyes and move from chord to chord so that you feel it coming out, instead of being in the way of something that's printed on a screen or on a piece of paper.
Mhm. Yeah.
Absorb it, internalize it, and then generate it.
Right, right. I love your insight, Stephen. It sounds so much more like a unifying experience, not so like, mechanical.
Oh yeah, yeah.
We just have a few more minutes. I have a couple questions before we wrap things up. I know that you're a lefty, and so how would you recommend someone who maybe already is playing guitar, maybe someone who's starting that's left-handed, if perhaps maybe they felt that the coordination just, like if you gave them a guitar, maybe they just kind of, held it the other way?
Leslie Sue, I have a confession to make. I need to change that comment on Facebook where I say something like unrepentant lefty. Those are my social and political leanings. I'm a lefty.
Oh,
I'm a
I
right-handed guitarist.
Okay, so
So sorry for the
you're
confusion.
not an actual lefty hand
Not
lefty.
at
I
all.
got
Not
you.
at all.
I got you.
Although my partner in a band I play, a duo that's actually one of the original Waybacks,
Right.
is a lefty. He plays left-handed, but strangely enough, he'll take a right-handed guitar like this and just turn it over and play the daylights out of it. He won't switch the strings around. On a guitar, you've got thick strings up here and skinny strings down here. These are the low tones and these are the high tones up here. He just turns it over and plays the daylights out of it, upside down and backwards. He's wired very differently from most human beings in lots of different ways. But my apologies. That's a confusing statement I've made on my Facebook page. Proud lefty or whatever I put up there. If somebody will say, "Oh,
Yes,
I didn't know you
right.
were left-handed." I'm not. I'm right-handed.
Okay, I see. All right. Now, and also, as we get ready to close out, Stevie, are there any additional misconceptions about the acoustic guitar? Let's say if someone was purchasing one that you could advise them on. And is there any other words of wisdom that you could share with us for someone who is, at whatever level, beginner, intermediate, even more advanced, we're all learning, continuously. What recommendations would you share with them?
I think for a lot of guitar players, I would kind of a general recommendation for anybody everywhere playing guitar, past the beginner stage, lighten up on the left hand. We all have a tendency at first, and often a bunch of us have terrible guitars, and we learn on really awful guitars where the action, as they call it, the distance between the string and the fingerboard is really high. And you have to use a lot of muscle power just to get the strings depressed so that they sound okay. Once you get that wired in to your brain, it's really hard to let go of it. But if a general note I give everyone of every level, even really advanced folks that I work with, is lighten up in the left hand. Chances are you don't need all the pressure that you're using in the left hand, and it'll speed up your playing and save your hands as well, rather than working those muscles so hard all the time. For beginners, I'd say learn three chords. And if for those of you watching right now, get yourself a D chord, a G chord, and an A7 chord. And that's a million songs right there. There's a wonderful, I'm reminded of a wonderful video called the Four Chord Song that is very hilarious. These three young Australian guys talking about music and how they've never had a hit. And the little nerdy keyboard guy explains why. It's because we've never written a 4-chord song. Well, with that 4th chord, you can play a zillion songs. If you've not seen the video, Joe Bob says, check it out. Check out the 4-chord song. It's the one with, I don't know how many millions upon millions of hits. You'll know it because it's three young Australian guys on stage. It's coming back from a commercial on a television show. And they show how many songs that you and I know have exactly the same chord structure. So that's a little bit of encouragement for folks that are just starting off. Oh, there's so many songs to learn. True, but a lot of them have precisely the same chord structure. So once you know one, you know 40. And that's one of the little secrets that I think a lot of people will find encouraging. In some ways, it's a little bit spooky. Really? There are only a few little chord forms that we respond to, chord sequences that we respond to? Yeah, kind of. But that should be encouragement, because that means you can play a zillion songs. That's kind of the little magic trick that happens with when people sit down with each other. A non-musician will say, golly, you'd never even heard that song before, and you jumped right in playing. Right, it's because I recognized the chord form. The sequence was something I was familiar with, and there are only about 4 formulas for those chord sequences. So,
Yeah. Stevie, we do need to wrap the show up. We always have our guest provide the closing comments. So however you'd like to close out the show, and also let us know how we can stay connected with you, your social media and whatnot.
Sure thing. I would like to thank, first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for this opportunity. It's been a lovely conversation. What I would recommend for people playing or buying guitars is just get one of any quality. Guitars can be adjusted. If the strings are too high off the fretboard, that's an adjustable thing. You don't have to, if you've got a guitar that's been lying around the house forever and it's just so uncomfortable to play, see about getting it adjusted. For a few bucks, that can be adjusted. Guitars don't have to stay the same way they are right now or the way you bought them. So just get busy playing. Find yourself online a D chord, a G chord, and an A7 chord, and off you go. You know, that's a great place to start. For social media stuff, I'm all out there. You know, steviecoyle.com, the name of the shop. That's my personal website. The name of the shop is Mighty Fine Guitars in Lafayette, California, mightyfineguitars.com. I'm on Facebook as Stevie Coyle and Mighty Fine Guitars, on Instagram, and I still haven't figured out Twitter too much, but I'm out there on Instagram and Facebook primarily. And do stop by, do say hello. If I can be of use in online lessons, just let me know. Tuesdays and Wednesdays are set aside entirely for lessons. I do nothing but, and there's plenty of room. So if I can be of service there, if you're in the neighborhood, come on in. If you're not, take a look at the website, and for the cost of shipping both ways, in case whatever guitar you choose is not true love, for just the cost of shipping both ways, I'd be glad to ship you any of the guitars in the shop. And see if you like it. You'd have 48, 72 hours to see if it's true love. And just like I say, if it's not true love, ship it back and pay shipping both ways, and Bob's your uncle, we're good. And if you do love it, keep it, and I'll cash the check.
Yeah. Stevie, thank you so much.
Thank you, Leslie Sue. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been a real delight. Thank you for sharing your knowledge of the high-end acoustic guitars and your playing, and your insights into teaching, and how someone can, progress and become more adept, as we were saying, with playing guitar, and your innovation, and also your lightheartedness, and your sense of humor comes through in different ways. It's a real joy too.
Great stuff. Thank you, Leslie Sue.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching Art and Talk. We appreciate the time you take to watch our art videos, and stay connected with us on our YouTube channel, on Facebook, and on Twitter. All right, and we'll talk soon on the next Art and Talk. Until then, be well and be blessed.